Hello and welcome to another episode of Analog Insights. In today's episode, Jules and I review the Silbersalz 35 offering, which is marketed as true cinefilm developed in the special ECN2 process and scanned on a true cinefilm scanner, which is, by the way, quite impressive seeing that, because for a typical roll with 36 frames, it needs just a bit more than 1 second to scan it, as it is used to much longer cinefilm rolls. The Silbersalz 35 offering is directed at either regular analog photographers who want to get a certain cinematic look to their images, or cinematographers who would like to try out a new film stock or a certain film stock prior to a major shoot. Silbersalz 35 began as a side project by the Stuttgart-based production company Silbersalz Film, which was founded by Kögel Albers and Thomas Bergmann, which we happened to meet later on, and which by now has 16 employees and is creating amazing image and marketing videos for major brands. When the offering was first released late last year, we reached out to Silbersalz asking for a promotion pack, and we promptly received one, and then set out in the course of the winter mostly to shoot these 4 different films that are part of such a pack. And upon kind of receiving the results, I was at first a little bit confused and also to some extent disappointed. And I reached out to Silbersalz, and Kögel Albers immediately got back to me, gave me a phone call, and we started to talk about it, and we realized, okay, there appear to be implicit assumptions on the side of cinematographers of how photographers would use this film, and also implicit assumptions on the side of me as an analog photographer of what I expect from a service that develops and scans film for me and then sends me back these negatives, and also sends me back the scans. And in order to bridge that gap, Silbersalz basically invited Jules and myself to Stuttgart for a Saturday to shoot 1 roll of film, to scan it, to develop it, to take a closer look at the results, and also basically to exchange views and to give us a better understanding of what they're doing, and also to give them a better understanding of what our expectations would be. Let's take a closer look at how all this panned out from the very first results that we've shot, making the assumptions of how tungsten light would work and tungsten-based film would work, and the daylight film would work, until what we learned in the course of the visit and beyond. So let's get some background first. The professional film industry, especially in Hollywood, saw a rather slow adoption of digital filmmaking technology at first. Only cameras like the Arri Alexa slowly changed that, and then contributed to the creation of 2 groups. On the one hand, you have people arguing that digital filmmaking technology easily outdoes or outperforms 35mm film. And on the other hand, you have the film purists who argue that nothing compares to the depth of color, the naturalistic look, and also the warmth that 35mm film comes with. On the digital side, we see renowned directors such as David Lynch or also Jean-Luc Godard. And on the other side, we see, so the Film Advocate Group, we see directors such as Christopher Nolan or J.J. Abrams or even Quentin Tarantino. And interestingly, there are even actors like Tom Cruise who refuse to act in front of a digital film camera. The whole conflict reached its climax in 2014 when Kodak was on the verge of collapse and basically financial bankruptcy. And it took a lot of directors and a lot of lobbying on their side to convince the major 6 Hollywood studios to purchase enough 35mm film, cinefilm from Kodak to keep the company afloat for at least several years. And this in many ways saved Kodak, and also created an interesting development in Hollywood that you until today see both major films being made on film, and at the same time you still have, of course, the majority of films being produced with digital filmmaking technology by now. So we have major movies being completely shot on film. Just to name a few examples: the award-winning 12 Years a Slave from 2013, The Imitation Game in 2014, James Bond, Spectre, and Star Wars: The Force Awakens, both 2015, then La La Land in 2016, and Dunkirk in 2017 were all shot completely on film. And some films, like the remake of the horror classic Suspiria, have selected scenes shot on film, and we learned from Silbersalz that this is quite common by now, even for music videos and image and marketing productions, to have selected scenes being shot on film because of the look that they create. And we even talked about budgets, and that this even makes sense financially, and that it is feasible to do that. And you don't necessarily have to have a significantly higher added budget for a marketing production if you do that. And that was very interesting. So as mentioned in the introduction here, really two worlds collided with analog photographers on the one hand and cinematographers and their perception of cinefilm on the other hand. So I talked a lot to Kirill and tried to find out what DPs and cinematographers are looking for in cinefilm. And here's what I understood. On the one hand, it creates a different focus that you have while shooting on film. So similar to what we have with analog photography, Kirill basically said, and many other DPs confirmed that you shoot much less and you are much more focused, and you shoot simply better when shooting on the expensive film material. Furthermore, the soft grain structure and of course the very special look and colors are important, but most importantly you get a dynamic range of 13 to 15 stops. And when I heard that, I realized, okay, that's the main difference, because basically DPs, cinematographers, were shooting flat images and basically raw files and all that long before raw files existed, and we had the kind of flat movie presets that we now see in all sorts of digital cameras and that are important for filmmaking if you want to have a lot of opportunities and options during the color grading process later on. And this is all what this typical cinefilm comes with. And this is made possible, these flat results are made possible by highly advanced Kodak film stock that really has been refined over the years many times, and a special ECN2 development process that is really advanced, and that involves, as was explained to us by Silbersalz, it is in many ways it's an advanced version of the C41 process that consists of 9 different stages with significant shifts in temperature which have to be adhered to down to 1.0 degrees Celsius. And you also need to take a close look at the pH values so that they are in line with what Kodak says in their official tables. The chemistry that you need is also quite expensive, so if you want to get an entire set of it, it's around €1,000 for one set, and then you have to be very careful in how you treat the chemicals. And what Silbersalz told us is that after manually developing the first 1,500 orders that they received, and of course they had optimized the processes so it was possible to do that, but then they decided to build a machine for it together with an 80-year-old engineer. They sat down and created the machine that you can see here and that they call Emma, and which had its first test runs here, but by now is in in regular operation and is actually developing the films for them. And shooting these Cinefilm, this true Kodak Cinefilm film stock as an analog photographer gives you basically the same kinds of benefits that a cinematographer has and the same color grading opportunities. But of course you have to know that, and this is when you get back your films, it kind of breaks with the expectations that you would have from a typical corner store or drugstore and even a professional film lab experience, because usually what you get returned is something that it can be used or is kind of Instagram ready, as many people would call it today. You can actually use that scan and maybe make fine adjustments, and you're ready to go. In the case of Silbersalz, what you get is both a JPEG and a TIFF file, and the JPEG, in my opinion, should really be considered more of a preview, because it usually needs a lot of work. It looks rather flat. The color might be tinted in a certain direction because of the film stock you used, and maybe also the light conditions that you had when shooting it. And it needs some refinement. But once you open up, for instance, the TIFF file in Photoshop, you can see, okay, there is an additional layer in there for the color signs that Silbersalz applied, fitting to the respective film. And once you play a little bit with the curves, you see how much dynamic range and how much is actually in this file and how many things you can do. So a regular TIFF file here is 130 megabyte large, and they're sharing, by the way, all the images. You can get them via a Dropbox link, and then typically the JPEGs are ready first and the TIFF files take a bit longer for the upload. But once they're available for download, you can really go through them and play with them. And here for me, this was the real aha effect. Okay, this is just basically the JPEG should be considered a preview. At least in my experience, this was mostly the case. And once I started tinkering with the files, I realized, okay, there's a lot going on here. And this, of course, breaks a little bit with the expectations of an analog photographer, because at least in my experience, many are not so prone in tinkering with the digital files, or some of them at least. And here, if you really want to benefit from the great material that you're shooting and get all that is in there out of it, then it really makes sense to put down that additional time and effort to tinker with the files and to basically do color grading on your individual shot here. Another important topic, if you look at the Silbersalz offering and Cinefilm in general, is of course color balance and filters. And here I had to understand a couple of things first. So first and foremost, the basics. The Silbersalz 35 offering is basically repackaged official true Kodak Cinefilm, repackaged into 35mm film cartridges with 36 frames. And as indicated before, part of the offering is then a true ECN2 development and scanning. And you can purchase all this, so both the cartridges plus the scanning plus the scans that you get out of it on the website, and you purchase it either as a pack of 4 different films, so all the 4 different Cinestock films, Cinefilms that are available as film stock by Kodak, or you say I want to have an entire pack with one particular of these films. And I've tried both. I first had for the original promotion pack, I had 4 different films, and then later on for a portrait session that I also took, I had just one particular daylight film. And here the different film stocks are the Kodak 50D and 250D, with the D standing for daylight and a color balance of 5500 Kelvin. And then there are two additional film stocks, which is the 200T and the 500T, with the T standing for tungsten and a color balance of around 3200 Kelvin. And when I asked about it, I learned that cinematographers would usually use only one film stock for the entire film that they are shooting. And they would decide on the film stock based on creative intent and also looking at the script and how the film would be shot. And if it would be shot mostly in a studio in artificial light, they would go for a tungsten color based balanced film. And whenever they have to shoot a scene in daylight outside, would simply use an orange filter and thus change the color balance and kind of outdo the effect of the daylight here. And once you understand that, you realize, okay, you can actually use these films much more independently from the light available and also from kind of your assumptions about how to use it only in tungsten when you're surrounded by tungsten artificial light. You can actually just go out with the tungsten film, add an orange filter, and use that if you have a certain creative intent. Of course, you need to test that and get your first results and get more familiar with these films and the film stock, but once you are, it's really, really interesting. And I've seen many experienced DPs who still know how to use that film or who've learned it from scratch, and they are really naturally doing this. Whenever they have the tungsten balanced film, they just add the orange filter if it's daylight outside, and they also have a very good feel for what is the typical color balance in Kelvin out there. And that was very interesting to me to see, okay, how you can also operate with this and not just say, okay, I only use the daylight film in daylight and the tungsten film kind of in artificial light or at night and so forth. One more remark, Silverslides also recommends to overexpose the films by one stop, so to rate them slightly different as indicated here on the box. But they explained to me the main reason why they do that and why they even add a card by now along with the pack that they send out is that they made the experience that many film shooters have old analog cameras with old built-in light meters that are not working 100% correctly and tend to underexpose their films, and then of course creates that whole drama and back and forth between them, and they just recommend to overexpose the film a little bit, and that results in more consistent and positive results. And of course the film here, with its dynamic range that it comes with, doesn't mind a little bit of overexposure, similar to what you have with the Kodak Portra or other advanced Kodak films. So this is fine here if you overexpose it by one stop, but if you actually know what you're doing, you can also just shoot them at box speed.
Oh my child, I know you're hurt and you can't let go. It's not your fault and you don't deserve all the bad and the hurt. I know you tried so hard. I know you've done your part. It's not fair. You did your time. How much longer will you suffer in this life? But don't give up. Just hold on tight. It'll be alright. All your life you've tried.
So after hearing all this, you might wonder, what is the difference between Silverslides 35 and the Cinestill offering that is also out there? So you might have seen Cinestill before. It comes either as a 50D daylight film or the 800T tungsten film, which is, by the way, the very same 500T Kodak material inside. And what is the main difference between the Silverslides offering and the Cinestill? The Silverslides 35 gives you the original Kodak material and the ECN2 process for which it was developed. So the entire process, and as described earlier, you get all sorts of options to manipulate the final images. For the CineStill offering, it is more of a hack in the sense of, okay, it removes the so-called remjet layer from the Kodak material and then repackages it into the cartridges, which then lets you develop this film in the typical C41 process, which is less advanced in comparison to the ECN2 process and less complicated also, which is the reason why it's available at every corner drugstore and every professional film lab, but which also means that you get a limited result in the sense of the outcome that you get. So depending on whom you ask, some consider it really artsy, and if you talk to some cinematographers, they say it's simply wrong because the result is just not what the film was designed for. Some people really like the CineStill look and feel to it, and it is special, definitely, but if you compare it side by side, it really is different. One, the CineStill gives you an out-of-the-box result that you can actually use and that is consistent across each and every film that you use from them, because it's the same standard process. And on the other hand, with a true Cinefilm, you always would have to work a little bit with the files afterwards because of the great dynamic range that you get and all the information that is in the file, and the special color grading opportunities that you also have. But at the same time, you can kind of benefit from the true value of the material that you're shooting. So these are the two different sides, depending on what you want. Go for either Silver Salts 35 or the CineStill offering that has been around for quite a while. So what are my personal impressions? I'm kind of torn between two different directions now that I fully understand what Cinefilm does. On the one hand, I'm thinking, why should I even use Cinefilm material as a still photographer? What's really in it? Because there's so many great color negative films or slide films out there that can be processed in the standard C41 or E6 processes respectively, and that give me consistently great results. And I know these films and they are great, they are amazing results, and I can basically use them out of the box. On the other hand, I have to admit that I get quite curious getting to know all the possibilities that are out there, and I found myself not only looking at Hollywood movies that were shot on film in a different fashion and appreciating the color grading that has been done in these films differently, and also looking for the grain in a film, in a movie like Dunkirk, and really appreciating it. But it also made me think of, isn't that interesting to have that complete new area of additional films that you can explore with the intent of using the creative possibilities that they come with. And that led me also to shoot the portrait series that you could see images from throughout this video. And after our visit, I basically reached out to Silver Salts 35, asking them for another pack, so 4 films from the 250D, the daylight film stock of Kodak. And I wanted to shoot that during a portrait session, and did that. And the results I got were so interesting, and it was so much fun for me to manipulate them and to see all the things that I can do. So personally, I can definitely recommend Silversals 35. It's a fair pricing given all the stuff that is going on in the background. You have really fair prices, you get really nice, beautiful results. You should be aware that, of course, the JPEGs that you get are not kind of Instagram ready in most cases, or at least not to my taste. They, in my opinion, do need some work. And you also get kind of for free in that offering the TIFF files for download, which in some other offerings, as you know, is kind of an additional price that you have to pay to get the TIFF raw material. And here you just get them as part of the offering, and that lets you manipulate the files significantly and get incredible results. And personally, I'm kind of drawn to using their offering again. And right now I'm particularly curious about using the tungsten films and getting to know them better, and also using them in daylight with an orange filter. This would be my next step. So if you're like me, definitely give it a try and follow your curiosity. For me, it was really rewarding, and especially knowing what I can do with the film material. But if you're more like, okay, why would I use it? And it does cost some money, and it does mean investing into a certain learning curve and getting to know the files and the creative possibilities with these films, then better stick to the existing still photography material that is already out there. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this extensive review of the Silversals 35 offering and our deep dive into Cinefilm today and what it can possibly bring to an analog still photographer. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please remember to like it and maybe even share it with your friends. And if you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe to our channel. Jules, Greg, and I really appreciate each and every subscriber coming our way. Thanks for watching. We hope to see you soon. Bye.